Welcome to this explainer. You know, it's wild how massive global power dynamics actually trickle right down into our daily lives. From high-level presidential summits all the way to the price of your groceries, it turns out it's all part of one giant chain reaction. So let's dive right in. To make sense of today's complex headlines, we've broken this explainer down into 5 quick chapters: the U.S.-China relations reset, the Middle East and markets, the U.S. domestic front, Cuba on the brink, and finally, the Colorado River crisis. All right, starting off with Section 1, U.S.-China relations reset, summits and strategies. We are beginning at the absolute top of the geopolitical ladder with the recent state visit between President Trump and Chinese leaders Xi Jinping over in Beijing. Now, looking at the so-called reset, what's really fascinating is the stark contrast in what each superpower actually wants out of this. It's like they're playing two entirely different games. The U.S., they are laser-focused on concrete economic wins, reciprocal trade, and crucially, pushing China to pressure Iran in the Middle East. But flip the coin, and China wants long-term predictability, what they're calling strategic stability, and absolutely zero U.S. interference with Taiwan. Literally two totally different scorecards for success. And get this, China's economic ambition goes way, way beyond flashy tech like EVs and AI. Just take a look at this massive production line in Qingdao. They are aggressively subsidizing totally everyday mature goods. We're talking washing machines, textiles, even the base chemicals you'd use for dry cleaning or making plastics. The goal here is to capture global market share across the entire board, not just in high tech. So why go after the boring stuff, right? Well, according to a new report from the Rhodium Group, it's all about targeting choke point products. If Beijing controls the global supply of basic, everyday chemicals, they don't even need a military to project power. They can simply weaponize the market. It's a calculated strategy designed to make the rest of the world incredibly vulnerable and totally dependent on their factories. Moving on to Section 2, Middle East and markets, the cost of conflict. Let's see exactly how these high-level diplomatic tensions spill over and actually hit the global financial sector. You might be wondering, how does an ongoing regional conflict with Iran directly affect your bank account or, say, major corporate strategies? It's so easy to view a war over there as something distant, but believe me, the shock waves are rattling every major financial institution and household budget right now. We're seeing the financial fallout immediately. Just look at the S&P 500. It dropped 1.2% right off its all-time high, and the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield just hit its highest level in over a year. Why? Because investors are really losing hope that the Strait of Hormuz is going to reopen anytime soon. That keeps global energy prices painfully high, which in turn pressures global bonds and completely stalls stock market rallies. The ripple effects here are massive, and honestly, they're bizarrely connected. Militarily, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are conducting unprecedented offensive strikes on Iran. That keeps energy and borrowing costs sky high. And that economic pressure, it's literally causing political chaos for Keir Starmer's Labour Party over in the UK due to national debt costs. It's even forcing Wall Street giants like Berkshire Hathaway to shift their portfolios, dropping Amazon and buying airline stock just to adapt to the new reality. It's a giant puzzle, and everything is connected. Okay, Section 3, the U.S. domestic front, midterms and migrations. Dropping down from those global markets, let's examine how these intense economic realities are profoundly shaping the upcoming U.S. midterm elections. Unsurprisingly, both political parties are totally weaponizing the economy. Democrats are framing the current situation as a GOP failure to control living costs, pointing to their own plans to lower gas, grocery, and healthcare prices. Meanwhile, Republicans are pointing the finger squarely at Biden-era inflation and border issues. The whole strategy for both sides is just hyper-focused on who voters are ultimately going to blame for the pain they feel at the gas pump and the checkout line. And right now, the GOP is leaning on a staggering war chest. We're talking an unprecedented $347 million cash advantage. Plus, their strategy just got a massive structural boost. With a simple one-line order, the Supreme Court rejected a voter-approved congressional map from Virginia Democrats. This essentially locks in the Republican edge in mid-decade redistricting battles across the country, giving them a huge advantage before a single ballot is even cast. Meanwhile, over at the Department of Homeland Security, we are seeing a strictly tactical domestic pivot. After Kristi Noem exited following some controversial policies, the new secretary, Markwayne Mullin, took over and completely shifted gears. He's actively lowering the agency's profile, he's quietly reversing personnel and spending decisions, and even hitting pause on aggressive large-scale ICE raids. The obvious, unstated goal here? Keep immigration out of the bad press headlines right before November. All right, Section 4,
Cuba on the brink, blackouts and indictments. Shifting our focus just 90 miles south of the U.S. border, a decades-long geopolitical standoff is reaching an absolute breaking point.
Just imagine trying to live your normal life, or even just sitting down to play a game of dominoes, by the light of a cell phone. That is the actual, on-the-ground reality for Cubans right now. They are facing staggering 20-hour blackouts, and it's sparking desperate street protests over the collapsing living conditions. It's a really stark look at the everyday human cost of this massive international standoff and the U.S. fuel blockade.
And Washington is really pressing its advantage here. They're pivoting away from just broad economic sanctions and going straight for direct criminal accountability. Federal prosecutors in Miami are reportedly moving to indict 94-year-old former President Raul Castro. They're largely focusing on his role in the 1996 Cuban military shootdown of civilian planes flown by the humanitarian group Brothers to the Rescue. This marks a massive, massive shift in U.S. strategy.
Finally, Section 5, the Colorado River Crisis, drying up. For our final chapter today, we're bringing the lens all the way home to a slow-moving domestic crisis that directly impacts the daily lives of about 40 million Americans. Take a look at this data for Lakes Meade and Powell. These are the vital storage banks for the entire Colorado River Basin, and their levels have plummeted by roughly 75% from their peak volumes. That is wild. What we are seeing here is the compounding effect of decades of severe drought, a warming climate, and massive, massive overconsumption from both agriculture and growing cities. So what's the root of the crisis? Well, it actually stems from a massive historical miscalculation. Way back in 1922, Western states signed an agreement that vastly overestimated exactly how much water the river would naturally provide. Basically, they divided up a pie that was much, much smaller than they thought. Now they're facing a brutal modern-day reckoning because the water simply isn't there to meet the obligations. And with those original water-sharing pacts expiring this year, a fierce political battle is brewing between the Upper Basin and Lower Basin states. You've got the Upper Basin, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, facing their worst snowpack year on record and demanding long-term usage cuts. Meanwhile, the Lower Basin, Arizona, California, Nevada, routinely consumes more than its share and is staring down imminent, incredibly painful reductions. Nobody wants to turn off the tap, but the math just doesn't work anymore. So, we'll leave you with this provocative thought. With 40 million people depending on a shrinking river, how will these states negotiate their very survival in a changing climate? As the water runs out, who gets cut off first? And what does that actually mean for the future of the American West? From massive trade summits in Beijing to the actual water pressure in an Arizona home, every piece of this puzzle is connected. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning how the macro shapes your micro.